So the poll is almost over, and I will be introducing our next speaker. He will join us very soon. It's Semir Mehadzic, product manager focused on continuous localization system at Infobip. And his presentation will be in engineering track. And the topic is traps of continuous localization. Hello, Semir.
Hello, Max. Hello, everyone.
Hey, nice to see you here. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, especially after an inspiring presentation like the one from Javi. Hi, Javi. Great job. Great job.
Yeah, so you're on the good wave right now, so let's keep it up.
Yeah, I have no Red Bulls, as some suggest in the chat, to be as energetic as Javi, but we'll be fine.
Yeah, Semir, just be yourself. It was another advice from Heavy. Yeah, good. So you are preparing to share your screen, right? And
Yes.
I can give some insights about the presentation. So Semir will be telling us a touching story about a company looking to revamp its continuous localization workflow. And it's based on the true events, really. And Semir will share 3 tips for selecting the right technology and translation provider. So stay tuned, and Semir is sharing his screen right now. We are waiting for your questions in Q&A session, and I'm turning off my camera now and give the mic to you, Semir. Enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Max. Hi, everyone. As Max has briefly announced, this is really the topic of today's talk is continuous localization and our experience with it. Now, don't worry if the title does not seem relevant to you. It actually might very much be relevant to everyone that's a typical attendee of such conferences, because it can apply to buyers like us. It can apply to linguists and freelance translators to know what kind of clients are emerging out there, how you can maybe snatch some business from their side, and also it would be hopefully useful for some of the TMS developers, the translation system developers, to see what's the overview of the status of this industry, because we've actually gone through all of it, I would say. So yeah, without further ado, let me just skip and try to make it as relaxed as possible. It won't be any typical complex talk, really. It won't, so don't worry. Yeah, let me just give you a second to minimize this. Yes. Let me just give you a brief overview. So about this and the 4 major traps that we encountered, and then the rest of the story will follow as per this screen. So about continuous localization. Now, don't worry. I will not do any technical explanations for you out there who are not engineers or in development world. Don't worry. I will also not show you any graphs, any images, any workflows, because that's really too much for a nice presentation and a nice conference like this one. I will, however, try to explain to you what is continuous localization, why does it matter, and why all of a sudden people are talking about this. It's been on for a long time, but it's been really in the buzzword lately. So continuous localization is actually just the consequence of business, how it's done today, how software is created today. The business requirements of any company, from Google to the small software creator somewhere out there, is to release new features often. And today's markets pushes you to release them fast. That's it. That's how it is today. So it kind of looks like this. If you see my screen, it really is. It's like burning wheels, going uphill, and all in a really, you have to take care of your business uphill too. So this is how it looks in a more, let's say, funny way. Now, in reality, making products, software products in today's world is not one image like this one. It's this. Multiple teams are working in parallel. You see one company that's driving this little vehicle up the hill, but in reality, in the background, there are multiple teams, multiple development teams, and other teams, of course, but multiple development teams actually doing stuff, creating, pushing stuff every day. And they have to work in parallel. No time to pause. They really need to improve things, release new things as soon as possible to beat the competition and to cater for the needs of the users. So that's how it is in the background. So literally you have multiple little vehicles running at the same time. So because of these business requirements, you had the development adjust. The development departments in any company had to adjust. So their requirements became quite different from what it was 20 years ago. The way they deploy, they release what they've coded had to be automated. It really had to be automated to be sped up, to be so that they could enable parallel work, like I mentioned in the previous slide. The companies needed to minimize manual work. So if something is released every day, then you have a lot of work there, so you should probably automate it. And of course, automation helps prevent errors, mostly human-based errors, because we're all humans. We will always occasionally make an error here or there. So the development had to automate the way they work. And what they, with time, this really got perfected so much that now any company can release things to the production, to users, to you and me, even 100 times a day. Most of them don't do it. They do it maybe weekly. Some of them do it monthly. But anyway, they can do it as often as 100 times a day. And this means that everything in development had to be adjusted. This is a really, really nice image. Take a look at this. This is the old, Microsoft Office desktop application type of product, how it used to be. You had years or months to create, to develop a big update for your product. With Agile, this really got squeezed and pushed more frequently. But now with this continuous development or continuous delivery, this is really gone much faster than it ever used to be. So this is the challenge, because of the business requirements, the development requirements changed. And of course, the localization requirements also have to be changed. They cannot possibly be different from what's being done in the business part or in the development part. We in the localization part have to follow it. So if you have, if your company has continuous integration and continuous delivery, the thing that I've just explained, you will need continuous localization too. It's not really even a choice. You have to have it. Why? Because manual approach that we all got used to before cannot work anymore. You cannot have people sharing out files, syncing them, changing them, checking them. No, it won't work because of the sheer amount of changes done daily. So there has to be a switch. There has to be a change in how we, in the localization industry and in the localization parts of companies, think about this. So it had to be automated. It really has to be. Right now, unlike before, there's no clear start and end of the project, translation project. You don't have, okay, now you have 2 weeks to translate these strings from a user interface. No. You will have every day new content, and this content it has to be constantly translated in a continuous flow. Here's one appropriate image. So yeah, what does all of this mean? I'm actually done with the introduction. I hope it managed to shed more light, but we will go, of course, into more practical details later. So what does this mean? All of this continuous stuff and new way of building products in software mean for localization? It means this. You've already certainly seen this, and some of you experienced it. Projects have the size of the projects changed. It went from large projects to small ones. Days or weeks left for translation now turned into hours or days. Errors used to be fixed slowly. Now they can be fixed within a day. Lots of pre-processing, the dreaded pre-processing of files, no more needed. You just get text only mostly now via API, so no really a need for complex project management and processing stuff. So that's really different, but that's just what's different. Those are not the traps. Let me tell you about the traps. Here's a nice image. really a proper trap like this one. So the 4 traps, the perfection trap. When you switch, if you work in a company that has continuous delivery and then the localization, translation must be released as quick as possible, as good as possible, really, in these words. This can be done because errors can also be easily fixed within a matter of a day, not wait for the next release in 1 year. You can fix it tomorrow. So that's okay. Even if you release something suboptimal in terms of perfection, let's call it linguistic, it still can be fixed at any time. It's agile. This is a real challenge for all of us, especially with us, for us with a linguistic background. We really tend to lean to the perfectionist side. But anyway, this is a challenge for us, and we need to look past this. Localization should fuel really the global expansion of a product, not hinder it. So that's why we have to accept the planned imperfections and fix them along the way. We're there for the business, not vice versa. So the second trap is actually replace words with words. I may have oversimplified this, but you usually get the point. This may be observed often with those managing continuous localization or localization in general with distinctly technical background, mostly development, because that's where all of this came from. Continuous localization nowadays is usually still managed by those who actually integrated it into the development pipeline. So it's mostly run by engineers, believe it or not, which is actually, I think it's a great thing, not bad at all, because it brings a totally different perspective, a totally different way of doing things. However, with this, the only drawback from what I've seen may be that the focus is on automation and process to get things in software, out of software, get it to translators and then merged back into the code. But the focus is not so much about the language quality, the nuances of the language. It's not, because it's too abstract in one sense. So for developers, happiness is when the code works. It really is. That's what makes their day. Needs of the translators are not really often addressed in the way that the traditional localization community is used to. When we talk about maybe translation memories, terminology, giving them context and that kind of stuff. So that part is slightly overlooked. That's the third. That was the second trap. The third one is old drones in a new suit. That's a very, very hidden, let's call it like this, trap. Look, a localization manager job description cannot just be tweaked and then put, okay, we will now have continuous deployment, we'll have continuous localization. You just adapt what you were doing for the last 10 years. And no, it's not just 2 items on a job description. This was so far done by mostly business or language people. Localization as such was managed. Of course, there are exceptions, but the average profile needs either business or language. And the focus is, of course, on the language and the quality. But continuous localization needs the tech side. That's why it's tricky. You need this side of the things too, to manage the engineers and who are building this infrastructure and getting the localization part translate, getting it into the product and back. So this requires a blend. This is something that must not be overlooked. It requires a blend of language and software, both types of thinking. It can be one person, still, don't get me wrong. You can have 2 people working side by side, or can be one person, but usually that person will need to learn a lot of stuff. This personally happened to me. I had to really learn how the product management side of everything, how software is created, to be actually able to juggle with this. But it's all fine if you have 2 people handling this. It's absolutely okay. Now, the fourth trap is actually, it is the last one we want to mention, but we will expand into this a bit more. I was actually surprised with what was hidden in this trap, to put it in that way. Continuous localization is still localization with a different perspective, sure, with a different flavor, but it's still localization. And this different perspective requires also different tools and different processes. Just like the job description, you also need different tools and different processes. It's manageable, but it's different. So my subjective opinion is that the translation industry is not really ready for continuous localization yet. Really not, at least not in the way one would think. So be prepared for it. If you're looking to start working with continuous localization in your company, or trying to get into a role that handles that, be prepared for the mismatch with the industry. What I mean by this, actually, this will be the other part of my presentation. What does localization industry trap mean in practice? As told by us, so not to leave you hanging with these traps, we'll share our experience with this trap number 4. It contains some general observations and tips about the industry too, beyond continuous localization. So I hope you don't mind. So one word of warning: events are not products of my imagination. It's really a true story. Really, none of it was made up or enhanced. It really happened like this. So it's a true story, but we will not be naming any names because it's not the point of this presentation anyway. So let me just tell you briefly about my company, why we wanted to achieve what we wanted to achieve. So we're a European company. We are a communications platform used by Facebook, Uber, Viber, banks, and all sorts of major tech companies. We mostly allow them to engage with their customers, to send content, messages, information to their customers and get it back and engage in conversation. But I won't go into detail. It's really not the point of this presentation. What is important for this presentation is that we, of course, use Agile. We have around 70 development teams across Europe and India. This is the image of our developers conference 2 years ago. So I think our number has increased at least by 40% by then. And for us, because of this global distribution and everything, CI/CD was a necessity. So continuous delivery was a necessity. So we also have, of course, had to solve the question of localization. Before, our product UI, our products were translated internally. We used volunteers from our 65 offices across the world. So you see the geographical dispersions. We were lucky enough to have people all over the world early in our stages. So we actually did what was, for the business perspective, the most sensible. We used their local experience. But this process, of course, was difficult to scale, and it was difficult to prove the quality. So, and we had some basic continuous localization, but no translation technology. So we wanted to change this. And step 1 was actually choose a translation system, because we didn't use a translation system as such, an external translation system. We had something developed in-house, but was far from a proper translation system. We ventured out to find one, because we really got to that level that we needed. So the step 1 was to choose a TMS and then choose a translation provider that will work within the system. So all clear, should be no problem, all clear, all easy. Yeah, not really, not really. So let me tell you a story about choosing the TMS and choosing the agency, and then with some final notes. We had, I'd say, pretty simple yet pretty wide requirements for the TMS. We needed an online system with API, with WordPress integration, of course, an easy-to-use portal for people to order translations and monitor the progress, and a solid translation editor to make things easy for the translators, both internal people, and the agency, of course. But beyond the product UI, what was in our request, what we wanted to have a TMS that would also work not just through API, but for our marketing and documentation and other content, the traditional translation content, no continuous integration. And that was kind of tricky. So we started with 10 candidates, 10 TMSs. The process was exhausting. It was slow with unexpected findings. Here's our top 4 surprises. Some of them are expected, some of them not so much. So the first one was usability and functionality. Some tools were simply just too complex. I have experience with localization industry and the tools, and I was unable to make my way through it. Really not acceptable in the 21st century. One tool was not even possible. We were not able to test it without the assistance of the sales personnel from that tool. Impossible, which is quite weird again in 21st century. One tool had a great translation editor, but a very basic TMS. So a great editor, but very, very simple and not scalable translation management capabilities. One was very expensive, but surprisingly with rather broken or poor functionality in our view, things not working as they should. Reviewers not receiving the email invitation to join the platform or later to review a project. It was really a no-no for us. So one tip, I'll be throwing out tips along the way. Have the tools tested by future users too. So don't just rely on business or tech people's feedback. The primary stakeholders. Get the users from your company to test it to see if it works for you, because otherwise the return on investment would be really degraded. And now the second surprise for TMSs was the costs and the pricing models. One TMS literally hit their pricing, literally. No comment there needed. One changed pricing on the fly. So what was some details that were presented to us in the beginning, after a few months when we narrowed a few weeks actually, after we narrowed the number of candidates, it actually changed without us being notified. One set an incredible, but really incredible price tag just to start using the system. I mean, we were looking into online tools. It's a cloud-based system. So doesn't matter if it's business to business, really, the cost does not justify really the features offered. And this is acceptable. It was a surprise for us, but maybe it is the reality of the tools out there. Several charged for the system by the number of users, which is kind of difficult then to predict if it catches on how much you will be paying in 1 year or two. And we are hoping to have the system catch up. It was quite traumatic for us. So please insist on pricing always, have it written down, and ask about the cost of the other comparable clients. Then the sales process. Now, this is really shocking. Some did really bad demos, but really bad. I have average expectation, but this was really beyond. On the other hand, there was one tool that never said no to anything. Whatever you ask them, do you have this feature? They would say yes. Although the actual explanation is something, a workaround of a workaround, but they would say yes to everything. One thing to reply to after 5 days, to some very good news that they were shortlisted actually. They failed to reply after, I think 5 days. We had to reach out through other channels to them. One had fantastic sales, but really disappointing product, really disappointing. So a tip, ignore the sales pitch. Be it good, be it bad, just ignore it. Keep your focus on the product and the things that you need out of it. And versatility. Some didn't support recurring continuous projects. Some didn't support ordinary files like docx or pptx. That's a problem for us because of the marketing side of the users. And some, interestingly, had no idea what TM alignment was, let alone have it. Now, I may be too long in this industry, but some had no idea what it is. So test the system with other departments if they're supposed to use it because of these file problems. But in the end, it took us 3 months to narrow down to one TMS, but we survived. Luckily, we needed a few weeks more to test integration, but that was okay. Next step, find the LSP. Requirements for the LSP were even simpler. Find the global LSP that could work within this selected TMS. Should be okay. We talked to 5 LSPs through recommendations, research, and that kind of stuff. It went faster, but again with some unexpected findings. This time, 3 surprises. Pricing model again. Lack of flexible policies. Minimum fee is a no-no in continuous localization. If you're working on the LSP side, find a way around the minimum fee because clients with continuous localization will not be able to work with you if there's a minimum fee. Automation may help. So also bring someone, if you're talking about prices, bring someone who's dealt with this kind of stuff already in the industry. Now, test results. One premium tier LSP had spelling errors in their test translation. No comment. One used a forbidden term from the glossary in the test translation. Again, no comment. LSPs and TMSs. Now, this was unusual. One LSP was offered as a verified vendor through a tool, but they openly admitted they worked outside of it. So LSPs tend, of course, to lure you into their primary TMS. That's good for their business, but that's a bad idea for you if you have continuous localization because you get detached things. So pay attention to the process that they want to use. We finally, of course, took us a few months to choose it, sign the contract, we negotiated a deal around the minimum fees, and are we done? No. We still have some questions to answer. We are actually only beginning. I've recently taken over this, so we're only at the beginning. We need to answer the question, are we providing adequate context for the translators? Just giving out strings, it's never gonna be good enough. How should we do the LQA review, the final review of the localized UI? Should we do it at all? Some people are saying it should not be done. How do we measure the quality? And that does not include the KPIs and metrics that are from the 90s. How can we collect feedback from the users? Because what they say is what matters the most. Should we switch to using the freelancers? When exactly? Should we use machine translation now for, of course, for which content? One engine or have them different per language? And finally, how to integrate with design tools. There's the shift left approach that the design also helps you reduce costs if you integrate with design tools. So we have yet to look into this. So some final thoughts. I'm actually more or less on schedule, so we'll have time even for questions, of course. Some final thoughts. Just it's obvious from what I've said before. Localization is this is a neat comment given the title of the conference. It's a living organism, and continuous localization is just its latest form. It will change soon. There may be something hugely different. We never know, but things are speeding up. But in any case, reinventing is really needed. Old metrics, workflows, roles simply do not apply. Continuous localization is technically the most advanced niche in the industry. So it's a mismatch between what some parts of the industry are doing. This is really in sync with the development and the tech companies and what they are building. And one great contribution of the involvement of engineering minds into the localization is that they have brought with them the best practices sharing. They're open sourcing stuff. They're sharing their experience. They're creating communities in a way that developers do this. That was not so common in our translation industry of the old days. And that's a great thing. We should continue with it. So it's safe to say, really, based on what we've heard so far, that we really have some very exciting times ahead. So yeah, thank you. I think we have some room for questions, like 2 minutes.
Semir, thank you very much. Yeah, we have some time for the questions, and there are several questions already. So let me help you to read them.
Yeah, I haven't read any of those.
Yeah, actually, some questions were already voted. So let's start with them. Grzegorz Wojcik. So the question is, can you provide more details on the deal you made with LSP about small jobs, minimum fee, daily number of hours you pay for, etc.?
Just in short, we negotiated that we would automate the stuff. So the small jobs, like less than 300 words, which would fall under the minimum fee usually, would go straight to the freelancers, pre-assigned translators. So they don't have any project management to do. And we would give them 48 hours to translate, even if it's 10 words. They have to really have some room because they made a deal to cater for our needs. We gave them 48 hours at least working days to get at least even the smallest project back. So that's what might work for both of us. We are yet to see how it develops in a year, but that's where we are right now.
Cool. Then there is another question from Aydin Fazlik. What is the difference between CL and CI/CD? Can CL be done with Jenkins? Which is the best tool for CL?
CL, continuous localization, is just the consequence of CI/CD, which is usually powered by Jenkins and that kind of stuff. So we come last at the end. So it doesn't matter which tool is used for CI/CD pipeline. More or less, the open source architecture for continuous localization can handle all of it. So the localization might be detached from whatever the tool you are using for the CI/CD part.
Cool. And another question from Aydin Fazlik. This topic seems very... okay, sorry. Yeah, another one from Peter. Lepahin, concerning no minimum fees. How do you find engaged, enthusiastic, and willing translators to participate in CL projects if there is no minimum fee? Until they have bigger clients and projects to work on, they will be quite reluctant to waiver their minimum fee and work for a couple of
Yeah, good question.
services.
I see where it's a good question. Look, at this point, this is why we opted for to use an agency in the beginning. Continuous localization seems to be working the best with freelancers directly in the pipeline. But then, to avoid the problem you have, people have retainers. They give some guaranteed sum to the freelancers to be at their disposal. And I believe that that model is the best one. I know some great tech companies are using precisely this model. But we are right now in the stage of setting up a continuous localization properly, and we couldn't afford just at this moment to look around for freelancers and engage in this relationship. So we left it up to the agency to negotiate how they're gonna take the translators in and how they're gonna retain them at this point. But it's a very, very tricky thing, and we will be seeing how this develops. But our end goal in a year or two is to move to freelancer because it's logical because of the lack of processing and no need for PM. For the software part, we can do it freelancers directly.
Semir, it's getting hotter and hotter, more questions coming. So let's answer probably the last one, and then we will ask you to answer the rest of the questions in connected translation community. So the question from Katrin Hosler, are there already some ideas for your LQA reviews and how to measure the quality?
The greatest shift, mental shift for myself, who was working with being actually the LQA reviewer for tech companies for my native language, and they all used, counting types of errors and that kind of stuff. And if there's 3 errors of this sort, the translation fails. That does not make so much sense in such a continuous environment, and it does not make sense in the long run. Why? The quality is not what we linguists say in software, of course. It's what your users say. If they are okay with the translation, whatever it is, then that's good enough. That's the answer of one question that was in the chat. How do you define good enough? If your users can use, and you have, you see that users are again using your product and loving it, if there's an imperfection, I would even say it doesn't matter. And that's a heresy for myself, a linguist by education, but it is. That's if it's good enough for the users, then it's good enough for us. And that's why we mentioned we need to figure out how to really get and collect feedback from the users about that translation, not just some random support or survey. Really enable a pipeline to get the feedback or corrections based on something that's not perfect.
Semir, thank you very much for this great presentation and bringing this topic to our audience. It was really interesting. So keep in touch with you, and we have to move forward now.